Dr. Fuat Kına happens to be actually a former fellow of the Center for Computational Social Sciences at Koç University. He is at Marmara University, an assistant professor at Marmara University's Institute of Population and Social Research. He's still affiliated with Koç University. He's still lecturing at Koç University, university's CSS program. Some of you are actually former students of Fuat Hoca. And you already know Helin, I suppose, who is one of the participants of SICSS. So they've been working together, and so Helin will also be part of this particular session. With that, I'll give the floor to Fuat Hoca. And again, a quick reminder, we'll be moving to the tower second floor after this session, but we're going to have a small break before that. With that, Hocam, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hocam. Yeah, everything is ready. Hello, everyone. I am Fuat, and I'm so happy to be here. Nice to meet you all. I participated in SICSS program in 2020 or 2021. I'm not sure about the exact time. So this is the second time that I'm invited to present one of my studies. The first one was at Boğaziçi University and focusing on linking digital traces and survey data to validate some of our digital trace measures. With the rise of, hopefully with the rise of LLMs, I think the rise of LLMs, I'm not sure whether you agree this or not, but it provided us an amazing chance, I think, to combine our technical computational interests with more theory-driven research questions. And by theory, I mean, so I'm working on social movements, protests, and contentious politics in general. The research that we are running with Helin is coming from the heart of social movement literature, and it suggests a pathway to solve some of biggest problems in social sciences in general, but more specifically in social movement research. So the title of our project, our research, is Synthetic Publics using LLM-based digital twins to simulate experimental responses to protests. It is part of a broader research agenda. So just like a proof of concept project, or in business terms, it's just like an MVP, minimal viable product. So before submitting the project proposal, we just wanted to make some prior tests. And then we decided to dedicate a separate place for that research and decided to work on a separate publication with Helin. So we may collect some feedback at the end also for finding chance to improve our proposal too. So let me start here. My talk has 4 parts. So first I will introduce the research question, then the puzzle motivated this study. I will dedicate a little bit more space for this puzzling part, since I believe it's the most important part of this general design. And after that, I will briefly review the literature and define the gap that we identify in the literature. And finally, I will introduce the empirical approach that we follow and 2 stages of our empirical approach, which are calibration and experiment, the design of experiments. So the second part will be presented by Helin. That includes the results for the whole calibration protocol, the results for calibration, and the results of experiment, and also our analysis for subgroups in the population. So let me begin with the central question of our study. So when people organize a protest, they usually want to change people's opinion, right? Public opinion. So they want more people to support their claims, understand their demands, and maybe eventually support the political change that is convenient to the movement's ideology. But an important question remains. Do protests actually change public opinion? Or if they do, under what conditions they are capable of doing that? Although this question sounds a bit simple, it's not. So it is surprisingly difficult to provide strong causal claims using traditional social scientific methods. The main reason is that we cannot conduct experiments with societies. So you cannot divide society into two different parts. One is treatment group and the other is control group. You cannot start a revolution in one of them to see the impact or to understand the reasons behind. So this is the main puzzle. We observe only one version of history. So history only happens once. And the alternative scenario simply doesn't exist. Our study, definitely there are some alternative approach to solve this problem in the literature. In a few minutes later, I will mention on them, some causal experimental designs. But our study proposes a different solution for that. So instead of relying solely on observational data, we can generate our own synthetic public and using these large language models, I mean. And more specifically, in our design or in this synthetic public, each digital twin can represent a survey respondent. So then we might have a chance to measure public opinion under alternative scenarios, under different parallel universes. And it is an experimental study which is working on creating synthetic experimental design. So we are in a very humble position right now and very much open for any comments and suggestions if you have, as I said. So before explaining how we built this world, first, let me describe the theoretical puzzle behind. So if you look at the last 15 or 20 years, you may notice something very interesting. If you analyze the field, the protests, the contentious politics, so many social movements have become much more visible than ever before, thanks to online communication tools, social media platforms, right? And specifically, if you look at the movements after, let's say, early 2010s, such as Arab Spring, Occupy movements, Gezi Park protests in Turkey, June journeys in Brazil, anti-corruption movements in India. So all of those massive giant movements were become possible via the rising new tools, right? So that was the case. They used these tools to attract public opinion, to gain some new recruitments, to recruit new members. However, two giant significant transformations happened after the rise of these movements. So first one, now newer social movements, the most recent social movements, are much less organized movements compared to the previous ones. And second, specifically after 2000s, mid of 2010s, let's say, in many countries all around the world, we have got involved in a phase of securitization. So political systems shifted to the right, and they became much more closed, specifically to this grassroots dynamics, grassroots politics, street politics. And more interestingly, for these massive and less organized social movements, the political outcomes even move in the opposite direction of their demands. And for sometimes these movements, even the outcomes, the political outcomes happened after the rise of these movements, even contradict what protesters were exactly asking for. So this is what we call plain incongruent change. And in the literature, in social movement literature, if you are familiar to the field, probably the concept of unintended consequences will be familiar to you. So there is this kind of concept in the literature, which is defined by Charles Tilly, which corresponds to the same thing. But here we describe that the exact political change was just the opposite of what is asked by the movement. This is exactly what happened after Gezi Park protests. So protesters were shouting against or protesting against the rise of authoritarianism of Erdogan, and just few years later, the system shifted more and more right, and the authoritarianism increased. This is exactly what happened in Brazil and India too. The rise of Bolsonaro in Brazil, or the rise of fascist Modi government in India. And we can provide more recent examples, just like anti-AfD protests in Germany and so on. But at grassroots, democratic demands widens, but at the top level, the democratic consensus, if any, downsizes or repressing capacity of states increases. So we may summarize, therefore, this puzzle with one simple sentence. Movements win the battle for attention, but they lose the battle for opinion, public opinion. So this distinction is very important because public opinion, even under repressive regime, is very important to regulate, for governments, I mean. So regulating the relationship between public and the movement is very important to sustainability of repression, therefore. So this puzzle becomes even more important if we look at the most recent reports. According to VDEM's democracy reports, recent reports, more than 70% of world's population now lives under some forms of autocracy, and for the first time in more than 20 years, the number of autocracies are now higher than the number of democracies globally. And at the same time, progressive protests have become much more common across the world. Large demonstrations have taken place globally. So when I report these numbers, the number of protests to my colleagues, they usually say, yeah, I know, this is the rising right-wing movement, right? Or the rise of counter-mobilization, but that's not the case. Recent research shows that these still vast majority of street protests have pretty much progressive claims, such as democratic rights, pro-LGBT rights, or some opposition to new pension reforms, economic rights, or maybe protests against genocide. So that's not the case. So it's still the grassroots demands for some progressive claims, but something happened. Democratic institutions are becoming weaker, and perhaps therefore the key issue is not whether protests attract the attention of public. Perhaps the more important question, what is the mechanism of attracting public opinion in the intended direction? So this is exactly, so the claim congruent change, we can label this. And that is exactly the question we want to study. So
how do you measure the attention? How do you say that the attention is rising?
For this research, I do not measure attention yet, but we can just maybe look at some Twitter data, social media data, or maybe the number of people participated in events can be another metric to measure that, or media coverage. So there are this kind of different measurement techniques in existing literature, but for this research, we do not look at.
The main claim is protests are gaining much more attention, but they're losing like popularity between public opinion, like in public opinion.
Yes, yes, but this is the general story in more than 20 or 15 years. Not exactly. So in the literature, it is usually covered by the measures that I mentioned, like media coverage, number of people participated in those events. Yeah, in general, we see more crowded protests all around the world. So there is this kind of general trend, but I do not have exact numbers. And in this research, we do not measure those numbers right now. We will only analyze people's support, public support for the claims. You will see that. And we do this by using survey data, calibrated, or let's say synthetic survey data. So our main puzzling argument is quite simple. The technological, yeah.
Well, while we're on the framing, I had a few questions about that. So I realize this isn't maybe the main point of what we're doing now, but I'm wondering about the framing of that puzzle, because like you're saying, there's there's rising progressive protest, and yet
Yep.
there's an increase in autocracy, but couldn't you frame it as there's an increase in autocracy, and as a result, there's a rise in progressive protest? And that's not
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah.
possible.
That might be the case, but if we look at the timing, so in the first phase of 2010s, we see the rise of massive protests. So that's how we define the puzzle mainly, where this transformation started. So by using these new tools, specifically social media tools, lots of movements all around the world started to mobilize those platforms. Yeah.
So I was thinking, Twitter tear gas explanation for an increase in protests is just that it's a lot easier to mobilize people.
Yep.
So it might not be related to any of the, backgrounds in autocracy, anything. It's just a lot easier for protests to organize. So.
Yeah, then social media platforms provided that opportunity, but also the owners of these social media platforms, we don't know how, but they became very close allies of existing governmental authorities. So in my opinion, in detailed description of this puzzle, I say that the technological gap between there was always technological asymmetry between movements and governments, but that technological asymmetry increased a lot in the most recent times, and the regulations around these platforms increased by this new allies of existing governmental authorities. I mean, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and so on. So, but this is again not the scientific hypothesis that we are testing here. This is just the background widely appreciated in existing social movement literature. So there is this kind of trend, the general trend. Was it clear?
Yeah. I think that, there's more to say on that, but yes.
Yeah, okay. Maybe we can discuss at the end also for that part. So now let us look at what literature tells us. So research on social movements has identified several factors from political context to organizational structures, resources, and collective action frames. So these are three different groups of variables, in fact, and different traditions in social movement literature: structuralist, rationalist, and culturalist approach in the existing literature. But here we may just focus for now on political context, and in the paper we aim to look at all three factors, but right now we just finalized our analysis for political context, so that's why I'm focusing on that part. Protests never take place in isolation. Election times, for example, usually increases movements' capacity to talk to the public, or political competition varies, or public trust in institutions can change. But more specifically, government's capacity to repress, capacity to apply repressive tools such as police violence, etc., can change from time to time, from government to government. For example, for the Kurdish issue in Turkey, we may just consider the difference between the war context, cross-border armed military operations, versus peace context. So this slide summarizes the theoretical puzzle behind our study, theoretical framework, but this is not the theory that we are focusing in the paper. The paper is gonna be more focused, but this is the theoretical design of the broad research proposal that I'm developing. So these factors affect whether citizens see movement as legitimate, whether they support its policy demands, and whether they are willing to participate in direct protest actions. However, these kind of questions require a very powerful causal claims. And for this, social scientists have developed several experimental or causal experimental approaches to solve this problem. The first approach uses survey experiments, vignettes. Maybe that might be familiar to most of you. So participants read a short scenario, and researchers randomly change one element, such as the protest strategy or the message maybe released by the movement, and then compare the results. The second approach, which is natural causal experimental designs. In the literature also it is called semi-experiments, causal experiments, that kind of alternatives we have. It is most likely developed and used by econometricians, applied microeconometrics. Maybe it might be also familiar to you through the concept of causal inference literature. Researchers basically take advantage of some exogenous natural shocks, such as natural disasters or geographic variations. So the key point behind this exogenous shock is that they're out of researchers' control. So that's how we utilize them to build an experimental design, basically. And they really provide strong external validity, in fact. And the third approach is unexpected events during survey design, which is quite interesting. So here, just in the middle of the survey you are running, an unexpected event happened, and you changed your question. Now you are trying to understand, you conceptualize this unexpected event as your treatment, and you compare the results before and after and see the treatment effect. So this is the main assumption behind. Assume that you were just running a survey analysis to measure approval rate of Erdogan, and in the middle of Erdogan, March 19 events happened, and then you developed a new question to understand what is the impact of March 19 events on Erdogan's approval rate. But there is one important limitation shared by all three approaches. So none of them can observe the alternative political reality because that never happened, right? So survey vignettes always ask individuals what-if questions. These are what-if questions. These are not real questions. But that if, in fact, never happens. So the responses of individual survey participants are hypothetical as much as LLMs. For the remaining two approaches, so the key problem with the remaining ones are, it is very hard to encounter, they are very rare. So it is very hard to find this kind of exogenous shock. So you design your question before, then you should just wait something else happen. Or you should just try to find a very relevant exogenous shock specifically fitting to your case. And therefore, honestly, people use these methods not because the treatment's social or theoretical relevance. Usually, they use these methods because of data availability. They are working on it because the exogenous shock is just there. And most of these studies, therefore, are not all of them, they are not research question-led studies in general. So none of them do not provide an effective, fast, theory-driven causal relationships between relevant variables and public opinion. So this brings us what we believe a central methodological problem. So suppose we want to know whether exactly the same protest would receive different public reactions under, or let's say during an armed conflict or during a peace context. So the ideal experiment would expose the same people to both political contexts, right? But this is impossible. The same protest cannot occur twice under exactly identical conditions. And as a result, one half of this comparison is always missing. So the missing component, the missing part is what we call in the literature, the counterfactual, the real what-if question. And this is where our approach begins. Instead of waiting for real world to provide that missing part, we can create a synthetic public that allows us to create that missing counterfactual. And of course, exactly at this point, you should rightfully ask, can LLMs do that? A language model capable of replicating the public? So the honest answer from the literature is not no, not yes, only partly. On the left side, you see what works. So if you just want to see the big picture, these models are surprisingly good. So Kim and Lee get decades of survey trends almost exactly right. Suh and colleagues close most of the gap to real human answers. And another research showed that language models can work outside of English speaking world too. But on the right side, you see what breaks. Bisbee et al. Showed that these fake people, synthetic agents or digital twins, are too similar to each other. So only about half as varied as real human beings. So the variation of synthetic agents is just half of the real distribution. This is general. So this is specifically the finding of that research, but usually this is called in the literature something like mode collapse or central tendency bias. And Chen calls this as the caricature effect. So the model usually plays up the stereotype and makes everyone in a group sound the same. And another research done by von der Heide, the LLMs unfortunately misses exactly the most relevant political groups. For example, to understand the impact of a pro-LGBT protest, it might be very important to understand LGBT's opinion, right? But those minorities are not available usually. So LLMs are not perfect in capturing that kind of nuances. So this is the wall we walk up to. And the key point is about how we frame the problem. So the field usually asks a broad question: can a language model replace the public? But we see a bit differently. The faithfulness is not something a model has on its own. It's something the model and setup configuration achieve together, not in general, for a specific goal in a specific context. So the usual view says few things. Faithfulness is the property of the model, and the aim is to copy, not exactly say, but conceptualize in that way. The aim is to copy. They're making a lot of tests to copy the public in general. We flip them, so faithfulness might come from the model setup combination together for a specific context. The aim is not to copy a public in general, so the question is no longer can a model be faithful public, but faithful for what? Synthetic opinion can stop being a test of copying a survey, therefore. So we can believe that, we can see them as they become a tool that we calibrate according to our experimental purposes or whatever purpose you have. So far, I have explained why we need a synthetic public. So the next question, how we can actually build one. Our design started with TGSS survey, Turkish General Social Survey, 2024. I was also part of the team who were designing the survey questions. So this was a national representative face-to-face survey, which is conducted with 2,600 adults across Turkey's 12 regions, not one regions. And the survey is especially valuable for our purposes because it contains a lot of variables. So in total, the survey contains more than 1,000 variables. And in addition to demographics, we could classify lots of variables under 6 thematic groups. These are political preferences, religious identity, social values, psychological well-being, trust, civic participation, and so on. Because we just wanted to manipulate this input part as well to figure out the best configuration. So for this reason, that was very beneficial for us. And also the richness was also important for us because our goal is to move beyond the average citizen. So we wanted to capture the exact nuances happening in society. So that's why we picked working on this survey. And in total, we used 117 survey variables, which are organized into 6 different thematic groups. So our research design consists of 2 stages, as I said before, calibration and synthetic experiments. The first stage was calibration. So here we compared alternative persona configurations, prompting strategies, sampling methods, temperatures, and language models. And then we select the combination that most closely reproduces the observed survey responses for a specific variable. And after this calibration, we use this validated synthetic population as an experimental environment. Let me briefly describe the design of experiment 2. So all digital twins evaluate the same protests, a march happening in Ankara, and protesters asking for Kurdish mother tongue education rights. We didn't change this in 2 scenarios. So we were asking questions about exactly the same protest. What changed is not the protest, but the political environment surrounding the protest. So we examined 2 political contexts separately. So in the first condition, the protest takes place in a highly securitized context and an ongoing armed conflict. In the second one, the same protest is presented during a peace context, which is represented by Nehru's context. And everything else remains identical. So the demand was same, the movement's claim was same, the protest was same, the participants are the same, the underlying synthetic population is the same. By changing only the political context, we just wanted to isolate its influence on public opinion, public reaction. And finally, let me describe our dependent variables in the synthetic experiment part. So we described 3, yes.
Sorry, there was participants about 2000. And did you just create copy of these participants' variables as in LLM agents?
Yes.
Like that was 2,600 participants, and that will be 2,600 agents.
So we didn't. So each correspondent doesn't reflect a different model. So we didn't run any fine tuning. If your question is that, it is no. We didn't do fine tuning. Instead of that, we only add these variables in the prompting part. But Helin will present that part in detail. Yeah, we didn't make any fine tuning for that. The main reason for that is we didn't have any budget. So, but if we have, maybe in future steps, we may consider it.
Why does it require budgets?
Because fine tuning is a bit require computational cost, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, not for API only, because we may use some local models. But if you don't have enough computational power, it is very hard to fine tune more than 2,000 different models. So we use same models for our models are specific to the variable, the questions that we are asking in the calibration process. So we sent a lot of prompts, but for specific questions, we used same models in all scenarios, and these are paid models usually, not free ones.
So you create an agent society instead of agent participants.
What is the difference? I mean,
I just missed some point.
So maybe in the second part, after Helin's presentation, your question might be solved. That's exactly what I'm believing right now. Yeah. So 3 questions we'd write from the literature: movement's legitimacy, policy support, and behavioral intent. So whether people would like to participate in this kind of protest or not. And since we are interested in the more than the overall averages, we want to examine how these responses vary across different subgroups of society, including political orientation, religion, region, ethnicity, education, urbanization, gender, etc. We looked at subpopulations too. And looking at subpopulations provided us 2 things. First, it provides another validity check by showing whether the differences between digital twins whether the digital twins reproduces the differences exactly we observe in society or we know from the literature. And second, it allows us to identify which social groups are leading, driving the overall treatment effect that we observed. Yes, now I will hand the presentation over to Helin, and she will be presenting the protocol for calibration process, the validation steps, and then the results of experimental analysis.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to present here. So we will start with calibration, then we will go through the experimental setting, and then we will talk about the subgroup analysis. I will go through the detail in each step, but just I wanted to give the whole picture. First, here in this study, the calibration may sound a little bit weird. So the calibration, we mean that we want to find the best setup that can mimic the real responses. For this aim, first we started with full survey information. As Fuat Hoca explained, we used Turkish General Social Survey. There were lots of variables such as demographics, values, religiosity, and etc. But putting more information doesn't necessarily mean that better agent is created, because sometimes it may cause hallucination or more, we are so we have so many contradictions. So if you add all of the things about a person, it may also contradict in itself. So that's why we wanted to understand which kind of combinations together create an agent that can answer a specific question. For this aim, in the second stage, we tried to create a different combination. C here stands for configurations. So, for example, in the first one, we may just only add demographic variables. Think about it like I am an agent, for example. My name is Helin. I am from Batman. I am 25 years old. So this is only demographic variables. But does this enough for predicting my political values? We cannot be sure. So, but the problem here is that we cannot be, sure about which kind of information is enough. So we need some testings. So this is our first stage in the calibration. We need to understand which kind of information input is enough to predict some outcome variables. Then we also change some other parameters such as the response strategy, temperature, and also adding some political context or address modes like asking with I language or U language. And then we compare these predictions of the agents with the real survey results. And at the end, we will be having two different protocols for two outcome variables, which are the first one is participation to a protest, which means in the Turkish General Social Survey, there is a question that asks whether the respondent ever participated in a street demonstration in the previous 12 months. And the other outcome we will try to predict is the woman work, and it is asked like if the woman's work full-time suffers the family life or not. So we choose these two variables for two reasons actually. And the first reason is about their response structure. Protest participation question is a binary question, and one stands for yes, I have participated, and zero stands for no, I have not participated. So it's a binary. And woman work is a Likert question. It's changed from 1 to 5. Strongly disagree to strongly agree. So we wanted to understand if the agent's responses is tied to the response structure of the outcome variables. And the second reason that we choose these outcome variables for calibration is about their link to the experiment that we will be running. As Fuat Hoca explained, choosing these variables and calibrating against it is quite important because these agents and their performance is quite tied to the combination that you have for the setup and the setup. So protest participation is organically linked to the experiment that we will be running. And woman work is signaling about how the respondent is, how is the preferences, how is the attitude toward progressive social change. So that's why we adopted these two outcome variables. And one thing to note is that we didn't use these outcome variables, in the persona construction stage, because if we had also put this information into the agent production stage, it would overfit. It will just take this information from here and then give it us, hand it back just as again. So it will be an overfitting. And another reason that we wanted to estimate this political participation question is that it's a challenging, because the affirmative responses are only around 5%, which means that only 5% of the population, the survey said, yes, I have participated into a protest. So it's a rare response, and it is hard to estimate this kind of unbalanced distribution. So yes.
And that corresponds to the ones who answered those items, like the N ones, 1,000.
Yes.
The other one.
So the Turkish General Social Survey is a rotating survey. So there are lots of questions. So not every question is asked to whole sample. So that's why this question is asked to this number of people, and protest participation is asked to 1,707 people. Yes.
So you have a survey in 2016, and you are trying to build a population based on the exact survey.
Yes.
And well, so if you ask the exact questions, you should get the exact results from your artificial society, right? If you build the artificial society based on the characteristics of those people, you should expect the same results if you ask them the same questions.
Yes, this is what we aim. Yani
The conceptual benchmark, you mean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So you are trying to replicate the survey with your artificial society and compare the results.
Yes.
That's what you're going to do.
Yes.
And to manipulate some variables to see what would the outcome be. Huh?
Yeah, the basic story is that we want to run an experiment, but before the experiment, we need to be sure that this synthetic public that we create from the survey data is capable of matching the real responses. So for this aim, we have two variables, which is first one is protest participation and another one is women work full-time, the attitude. We didn't use them for creating agents, but we have the real answers. We have the ground truth. So we ask the same question to the agents that we created, and then we compare the distributions and also some scores, if we match or not, or what can we do to match, and what is the setup that perfectly get close to the real responses. Yes.
So theoretically, this is just an imitation of general public from the 2000s, and it will answer certain questions that you asked that haven't maybe happened at that time. But I wanted to ask how you could maybe incorporate the social or economic changes that have happened since the development. For instance, like artificial intelligence has been a huge change in all of our lives, has given us so many resources to learn more and maybe change our views.
Yeah, exactly. This is one of the limitation that we need to maybe run it again with a newer survey.
The main way of the TGSS is just the field work just done recently. So we will replicate this result. So it was the field was in 2024, but now the new way in 2026 is coming on the way. And between these two times, very important contentious political events happened in Turkey. So your question is totally right. March 19 events and also the transformation of Kurdish political movement, two important, two significant transformations. But this was the most recent version of the data available. The questions, the data they released is not ready yet. But the TGSS is the leading team is at our institution, the Marmara University's Population and Social Research Institute, where we both are there together. So probably before releasing the data, they will provide the whole raw metadata with us, and maybe we can just replicate the analysis with the new version. And it might be also good to compare the results for different times too. But very good question. Thank you.
Yes. So I'm moving. So when we calibrate, we need to give each setup a score at every stage so that we can compare the change, how the change affects the results. But we didn't only use one metric because we care about two things. One is the distributional alignment, and the other one is the individual level agreement. By distributional, I mean that, for example, think about the protest participation distribution. I said that people who said I didn't participate into a protest is only 5%, and the rest is 95%. We may achieve the perfect alignment with this distribution, but we may miss the people actually participated in protest, but they are, just assigned 0. So we may choose we may miss if we only look at the distributional alignment. So that's why we focus both on distributional fit and also the individual fit, and the response structures different. So we have adapted WOS distance for women work and GST for participation to a protest. And for the individual level agreement, we choose especially recall. And for the women work, we are focusing on the quadratic weighted kappa. So we will be considering those two metrics in each step. And the calibration goes like a funnel approach. We actually started with a lot of combinations, then we narrowed them step by step. In the first step, we had 11 different variable combinations I mentioned at the beginning. We fixed all other parameters. We changed only the persona input information here. Then when we look at the score, we selected we made a short list for 2 outcome variables and then moved to the second stage. And in the second stage, we changed the response structure and temperature. And again, we compared the scores according to the metric that I have explained. And then we went to the third stage, and here we tried other models. So far, until the third stage, we have used GPT-4 Mini, but in this stage, we also tried another model from OpenAI, Gemini, and Llama. I will be giving details about the steps as well. And as the fourth step, we tried to add some additional information to the prompt. First one is about the context, because we wanted to understand if the specific information about Turkey may help agents to behave better. So we tried to add ideology. And also we wanted to understand if the address mode, by address mode I mean I language and U language, change the performance. And we also tried to understand if the chain of thought strategy improves the result or not. And after this step, we have a combination for each outcome, and we will lock it to use it in the experiment stage. So if we start with the first step, as we said, the persona content is the main calibration level, because how much input is quite important. And here we have, as Fuat Hoca explained, 6 thematic groups: demographics, belief, economic attitudes, social attitudes, psychological attitudes, and political attitudes. And for example, demographic team have 9 variables. We want to understand if only demographic input can be enough or not. Then we try to add everything together, if it is the best strategy or not. Then we try to, remove demography and see the results. And belief and ideology and identity, we want to, remove this input variables and see how the performance change. So these are the configurations we have tried. And the result is that actually this is the most important stage in this agent production thing, because the results are changing in very, drastic way. If you look at the participation to a protest, the main metric was GSD. It doesn't change that much. So, and these are really good scores. For GSD, lower is the better. As you can see, they are quite close to 0. But we also care about the recall. By recall, I mean that how much of the respondents say I participate is actually participated to a protest. So here we see that some of them are close to 0, which is terrible, but some of them are a little bit higher and close to like 0.5. So changing the persona content changed the results a lot. And for women work, the main metric was loss. And here again, the lower is the better, but as you can see, the scores are quite higher here. So if we stop it at right stage, we will say that we cannot infer we cannot simulate the responses of women work variable, and this is, not good results, but we will be, tuning other parameters as well. But even if you look at the, change here, for example, this one has 0.4 and GT0 is 0.9. So the change is so drastic. So it is important to decide what kind of information that we will be putting into the agent. This is our first stage and the results of the first stage. And as the second stage, as I said, after, yes.
Instead of choosing one category itself, did you maybe apply PCA and did you check if you choose some random variables in some categories, how was the change that? You can apply PCA and you can look at the PCA's volume and it can give you some most explicative variable in the deviation. So like PCA,
Another component, another variable there.
you're just
Inferred variables, right?
you're just inferring, you're just deducting. This is dimensionless reduction, and in this dimensionless reduction, we can load this PCA value loading, which just explain us where does this differentiation coming from.
Yeah, I see your point, but the principal components derived from.
Not using principal components, but maybe you can use another method.
I see.
That instead of choosing one category, maybe you can choose some variable from the categories.
Maybe some variables carries the most of the total variance, and that might be relevant.
Maybe you can take 2 of them from the demographic, 3 of them from the.
So we, as I said before, we do not have any external budget, so we spend our own money. So for this reason, there was a limit that scenarios we can try. Specifically for this reason, we first conceptually discussed on the groups of variables, and we just wanted to make all of them conceptually relevant at the first place. But maybe in future steps, we can try to figure out maybe from one group, the best performing variable might be one of them. In another group, we can pick another variable, so that might make sense.
And you create your own one.
By the way, these groups are defined by ourselves. So demographics, socioeconomic conditions, and so on. So we categorize this variable under these banners to make them conceptually relevant at least.
And also, lots of questions are really similar in the survey. I know, like this, how is it? Some of them is really relevant, similar, and yes, thank you.
So these configurations from 0 to 11, these are different models, right?
No,
What?
they are not model. They are the input that we send to the model. So we change how much information that a person, that agent's prompt has.
Then the model? predict these DEs from this C0 or C1.
Then model tries to predict the outcome variables that I explained: protest participation and attitude towards women working full-time.
I don't think it's possible when we put all the variables to C1, that is not still the best.
C1 is only demographic. Yes. I'm sorry, C0 is demographic, C1 is all of them. But it is not the best scenario, because as I said, it may contradict with itself, it may reason to model hallucinate. So more is not always the better in this case.
And could you please show again which was the best in predicted?
In only first stage, the best, I think, for protest participation, all of them are quite well. But if we look at the recall, I will choose the best higher recall. So it is C9. But we will change other parameters as well. So the final choice will not be the score, the high scored here.
And that model represents society. Yeah.
It is hard to say.
Yeah, maybe.
We try.
JST means the distribution of similarity. Recall refers or kappa refers to individual level similarity. So there are different components of the problem too. But I'm not sure, do we have enough time to finalize this whole presentation?
So I will be faster. Okay. So after we pull out the best performing shortlist in the first step, we move to the second step. Here we're going to change the sampling strategy. By sampling strategy, I'm referring to how we send the question to the model. We can send it directly, as you can see in the left one. We just send it to the model as the question it is. And verbalized sampling is a method to it is generated to solve a problem that Fuat Hoca explained, the mode collapse. Mode collapse is the problem that model choose the safest answer. So that's why most of the responses are regressing to the mean, like in the middle, they are being in the middle. So that's why instead of asking directly, we are asking model to give distribution to each option. Nasıl düzelteceğim bunu?
Sadece gitti, sebepsiz gitti.
Aynen.
It was like a tiny bit of, if you even move it slightly,
Dokunma.
sometimes when I approach, it fixes itself.
Allah Allah.
You have a direct, you have an HDMI here, maybe if you,
No,
no, this is direct
it
HDMI.
is HDMI.
Mhm.
Aa. Hocam ben bu bilgisayarı kullanıyorum 6 aydır. HDMI gibi şey kullanmıyorum.
But it's not working even. Something happened. Yes.
Yes.
Hay Allah ya.
Çok şükür.
Olaya bak.
So in the verbalized sampling, we ask model to give distribution to each option. So for example, the model output will be like 0.5% that it will be the answer, or 0.2 and etc. Then the model samples the from these distributions. So this may help to create more diverse, more heterogeneous results when we ask and we prevent to model to regress to the mean. And yes, but are we sure that verbalized sampling may help? And the answer is it depends. It depends on the response structure of the outcome variables. If you remember, protest participation was binary. So I think about the binary question. There we don't have different categories to begin with. So it's just yes or no. So creating extra variety doesn't really help here. But in fact, on the left side, you can see that it magically improves the results. It moves from 0.4 to 0.1. So that's why in the Likert and multiple options, verbalized sampling may improve the results. So as the third step, I said we looked at the different models. And let's start with the protest participation. As you can see, the lower is the better, if I may say again. GPT-5.4 mini wins, but actually, when you look at the GPT-4o mini, it's also quite well. But when we decide which model performs best, we also need to take recall into consideration. So that's why look at the second figure, and here you can see that GPT-4o mini is obviously better than the GPT-5.4 mini. So that's why for participation to a protest, we decided that GPT-4o mini is better. And for the women work, it is more clear cut because Gemini is performing better in terms of both distributional and individual alignment. So this is the final, this is the final stage. As I said, we try to add some context information. We try to change I language to U language, and also we try to add explain reasoning strategy to a prompt, but they didn't really improve the performance as it was in the first stage. If you remember, changing the persona input change the performance much more drastically than these strategies. And as a result, for women work, when you look at the table here, actually the VAS score is better for the first row. But we also, as I said, considered the individual level agreement. For the quadratic kappa, the higher is the better. So that's why we choose the second row as our final calibration for women work. And for protest participation, again, this is listed by recall, and GST is already quite good. We already captured the distribution of the real protest participation with our agents. So that's why we focused on recall, and it was better for C7 direct sampling and GPT-4o mini. So at the end of this funnel, we had these two different calibration protocol for two outcomes. So think about it like making a recipe. For a perfect dish, first you need to choose the ingredients, then you need to adjust the heat or cooking time, and then you need to try it in different settings, maybe one more time, two more time falan. Sonra at the end, you have a perfect recipe. Yes. Yeah.
Did you change
Instead of saying like I am a person, I'm a 25 years old university student, I said to the model, you are blah blah and you are blah blah. So this is the address mode change.
also that I think about the having Kurdish education as a another time. I think the ethnicity is highly important in that sense, rather than calling it demographics. If you label it like one variable as an ethnicity, because for some of those it's an input, for some of those it's an output. So I think in that sense, ethnicity should be something independent and then demographics, but just
actually, these namings of the teams are just for us. Model doesn't say it as a thematic groups. We only choose to, choose between those two groups, but model just see, okay, Helin, Kurdish, age 25 kind of stuff.
ethnicity, like
Yeah.
it's logic in here, but like in our analysis, like outcome variable is the most important one,
Mhm.
the one between no credit for the way as well. So because it's about ethnicity, I feel like ethnicity should be treated different than other variables here, but these are kind of
Yeah, intuitionally you are right, but there is always this risk of overfitting, right? We are trying to avoid one.
Yeah.
So if we, in this calibration process, we include ethnicity as one of our demographics, but at the end, in the protest part, in the experimental part, we should dedicate a specific place for being Kurdish, because if then that might spoil all the relevant stuff in calibration.
But for general, one being a woman probably will make a difference,
Yeah, yeah.
but or okay.
So as a result, for protest participation, I said the affirmative responses were around 5%, and we predicted around 6. So it is quite good in terms of distributional fit. And also we predicted half of the actual yes answers. So it is the result of recall. And for the women work, you can see we moderately, I think, mimic the distribution that is in the ground truth. And I'm skipping this part because this is the most fun part, actually. We move to the experiment. So as Fuat explained, we wanted to understand how the effect of a protest on public opinion changes across different political contexts. And our case is for a protest for mother tongue education. Here we wrote two contexts, one is security and one is peace. And I wanted to read them. Like, the Ministry of National Defense issued a statement on the ongoing clashes with Kurdish armed groups in northern Syria. It reported that armed confrontations had intensified in recent weeks and that the Turkish armed forces were continuing their operations. The statement also noted casualties and increased security measures in the region. So it is a highly security context, and it is mimicking a news coverage, actually, media coverage. And in the peace context, instead of saying like the conflict between those two groups ended, we wanted to highlight a peace context in more social settings. So that's why we wanted to assert that we wanted to highlight a Nowruz celebration. And in this peace context, we say that this year's Nowruz celebration took place in a different atmosphere. Amid an ongoing peace and negotiation process, Kurdish and Turkish citizens celebrated together in many cities. Observers reported that celebrations were more inclusive and festive than in previous years. So here we are like simulating an environment that there's no clash, and groups are celebrating together. So after that, as Fuat explained, we asked 3 questions. Two of them are more about attitude. We ask, is this a legitimate rights claim? And a response structures is Likert. And the other one is about policy support, and we ask, should mother tongue education be legalized? And it is also Likert. And the other outcome variable is binary, and we ask whether they will join the march. So if you remember, in the calibration protocol, we separated 2 response structures. One were binary and one were Likert, and at the end we had different protocols for these response structures. So here we applied what we created the formula in the calibration stage. So for Likert outcome, we will be using Gemini C7 verbalized sampling and temperature 0.8. And for behavioral intent, for participation to a protest, we will be using GPT-4o Mini, C7, direct, and temperature 8. So here I show the main effect of the context. Remember, protest event exactly the same happened in the exactly same conditions. I'm sorry, protest event is the same, but we change the context. The only thing that changed is how protest is embedded in a contextual situation. The pattern is obvious. Across all three outcomes, peace contexts produce higher support than the security context. And on the left, we see two Likert outcomes. For movement legitimacy, the average response is 2.3 under peace, but drops to 1.9 under security. And for policy support, it is similar. It is 2.1 under peace and 1.8 under security. So it moved to the results. And also behavioral intent is even more drastic. Under the peace context, the participation to this protest is around 26, and in the security context, it's around 7%. Here it is the main paired comparison between security context and peace context. Here the x-axis shows the difference between two conditions, which means security minus peace. So if the estimate is on the right side of 0, it means that security context produce higher support. And if it is on the left side of the 0, it means that peace context produce higher support for the protest. As we can see, all three outcomes, they are all on the left side of 0. And for perceived legitimacy, the security frame decreased legitimacy by 0.3 points. And for policy support, it's also around 0.3. While these effects are not huge, they are statistically significant. And the strongest effect is on behavioral intention, meaning that respondents would actually act or participate in some way. So the main thing here is that I guess peace framing generates more legitimacy, more policy support, and especially more willingness to participate into a protest, while security frame statistically depress all three outcomes. And here we can see how the responses shift. The security context mainly moves people toward the end of the scale, to the rejecting end. For movement legitimacy, the share of people who strongly disagree goes from 30% to 46% under the security context. And for policy support, strong disagreement goes from 41% all the way to 55%. So this is the change across the responses. So we wanted to understand, so previously we only observed the average effect, but average effect can hide many things. So on this slide, from this slide, we start reading beneath the average. We look at subgroups. We do this for two reasons, because first, it's a kind of a validation for us, because we have some sociological imagination and some expectations. We want to see if this really works. And the second reason is the effect heterogeneity. Here's the question is about which groups actually move compared to other one, because the effect is not uniform across the groups, and our expectation is that context should matter most among the groups that already have higher baseline for support. So let's start with the simple question. Do the group means differ in the way that we expect them to do? By ethnicity, we would expect that in this setting, Kurdish twins would support more, and we see that their means are higher than the other groups. And we also would expect that more left-oriented agents to support more, and we also observe this kind of pattern here. And also we would expect that more the education level, the support for mother tongue education and the questions would be higher means, and this is also what we expect. And the fourth expectation was about age. We would expect that younger people would support more, and we also see this kind of pattern here. And so this is explained in the previous one. Yes, this one shows the subgroup picture in more detailed way. Each row is a subgroup, and each point shows security minus peace effects for that group. We have three panels here: movement legitimacy on the left, policy support in the middle, and behavioral intent on the right. So let me start with the overall direction, because that is the first thing to notice. For two attitude outcomes, legitimacy and support, every single point sits left of the zero, which means that security context lowers both outcomes. And also in the right panel, it is similar, but it needs to be, examined a little bit more carefully, because attending to a protest coded as 1 and not attending coded as 2. So a positive value means that people shift toward not attending. In other words, this panel is telling the same story under security context. People are less willing to show up. So the direction is consistent across three outcomes and across all groups. But there are some heterogeneities here. The effect is not the same size for everyone. So if you look at the Kurdish row, it moves most among the other groups, but the confidence is a little bit larger. And also we can see that they drop in the legitimacy is the largest, and shift away from attending is one of the largest too. The same is true for left-leaning and more educated groups. The groups that in the previous slide, I showed higher support. So higher the support, the change is more, because, for example, think about right-leaning people. Their preference is more fixed than the, already participating to a protest, or more left-leaning ones. So lastly, here we look at the interaction. Each line is a political group. As you can see here, we look at the political orientation, left, right, center. So it is also, I think, expected that right is on the upper one, and it changes less, and left is in the most lower one, and it also lowers most. And I think their alignment is also expected. The left is in the at the base, and also the right is at the top. And also here we look at, so this was for behavioral intent, and this was for movement legitimacy, and this was for policy support. We can see the change across political groups when we change the context from security to peace here. And as the last step, we also wanted to check the geographic alignments of this responses. So for behavioral intent, we noticed two things here. First, the whole map is red, which means that every single region is positive, which means that security context push people away from attending everywhere in the country. There is no exception, but it is not, flat across space. We can see that the strongest effect is in the west, and the least effect is in the east central Anatolia. So changing context from peace to security affects more for the people in the west side, and less for the eastern side. And this is for movement legitimacy. Again, the whole map is blue, which means that every region is negative. So security context lowers legitimacy for everywhere. And same story, but here a drop means less support. The effect is spread widely, but deepest blue is in the Western Black Sea. And the weakest effect is again in the East Central Anatolia. So this was the subgroup analysis. Now I hand back to Fuat Hoca again to show our limitations.
So let us close our presentation with some few honest limitations. We already talked about the limitation part, by the way. So the first one and third one are quite similar. It refers our computational limited computational power. So we followed a stepwise optimization process. So in each step, we optimize configurations, input variables, models, etc. But we can also optimize all of them at the same time, but which means we should run lots of additional models. And also in this optimization process, in the calibration process, we followed a distribution level pipeline. And then at the end, we decided to the best performing in terms of also individual level alignment. But we can also optimize from the beginning to the end, looking at both individual and distribution levels together, which is expected to increase the number of configurations, the number of replication of the analysis, which requires additional some computational cost. And another limitation, again, we already talked, the data is getting old. Lots of events happened and they change, I believe, the dynamics of street politics in Turkey. So we may replicate the analysis with newer versions of data. And in future steps, the first thing in my mind is to include some regression analysis in the calibration process. So we may just compare some regression coefficients in both synthetic and observed data to tune the model setup combination. That might increase the performance of our models, more localized, more contextualized models we can have, or let's say configurations we can have. Second, we can just vary context more. We just analyze two contexts, but we can add additional context or some midpoints, etc. And maybe we can add some additional parameters, factors, looking at organizational resource-based factors, such as whether a traditional trade union or non-organized, less organized worker groups are more effective to attract public opinion in the intended direction. Or we can just tune the framing, collective action frames from one version to another, such as in this example, a group of protesters can refer to a verse in Quran or self-determination right of every nation. So that might change the result again. And finally, we can test some other new cases, as always. There are lots of other movements in Turkey, EYT movement, subcontracted workers, Istanbul Sözleşmesi, and recently, maybe you know, private school teachers protests in Ankara. We may try replicate the analysis with more recent examples too. So that's all we have. Thank you for your interest and attention. Yeah, thank you for having us again.
First of all, super interesting, the digital twinning, and also I think that it is quite interesting to do research at this point where it's also at the beginning of everything. I'm curious, more of an opinion question. So one of the problems that there is in communication science and psychological research is that oftentimes we measure intent rather than actual behavior.
Yeah.
And we always aim for more behavioral measures because an intent for sharing, for instance, is not really actual, it's a proxy for actual sharing, right? When we have these synthetic publics, we of course cannot think of behavior.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So I'm just curious whether you think that is just a limitation for this particular method that is always going to be there, or just your opinion about how to navigate that tension.
Yeah, it's a very broad structural limitation, I think, because these are language models, so we can just talk to these models. We cannot see them, we cannot follow their behavior. So this is, I think, the biggest structural limitation of this design. I'm not sure whether what can we do, but maybe we can just build some interactive environment. So yeah, if there is an interaction between different agents, and I think this is also the key problem in the existing literature, because, for example, in synthetic experiments, you can ask individual questions differently, so they're not seeing each other. But psychologists can, to solve this problem, create some groups to see the interactions as well. So we can just create these kinds of environments to see whether they are gonna build some interactive relationships, or maybe to run this kind of analysis. So people create these interactive environments using LLMs too, but maybe we can also look at agent-based modeling to include the network data too. Yeah, thank you.
I'm coming from maybe a more skeptical perspective, because I'm struggling with the idea that this replicates an experiment in any kind of way. And maybe you can help me to understand basically how you extrapolate from data that doesn't exist. Because I'm trying to compare it to, say, imputing data, missing data based on other existing participants for which you have that data. But this seems to me fundamentally different in that you're trying to, as you say, to alter the political context. So you're thinking about what it would be like if you asked participants questions in a context that never existed, none of them ever answered those questions in. And I'm not understanding how this isn't basically like a well-informed hallucination. And it is possible to validate that, but looking at the face validity, the outcomes that you did see, what I was really struck by was the protest outcome and how many people say they would join the protest. And one difference is like, behavior versus behavioral intention is quite different, but in your actual data set, you had about 5% of people had attended a protest, any kind of protest in the last year. Yeah. And in the synthetic data, you had from 6 to 25% of people saying that they would join a protest for a cause that was, even in the synthetic data, unpopular. Most people were not in favor, did not think the movement was legitimate. Having a quarter of the population say they're going to join a protest in favor of mother tongue education, even in a peace setting, doesn't seem to have face validity to me. So I would love to be convinced because it's a really interesting idea, but I'm struggling to get on board.
Yeah, I think these are very rightful criticisms. So these are just baby steps. So you are totally right to be criticized against this kind of methodology. But we just wanted to show that there is a path here that we can follow. The experiment part was totally a use case at the beginning. But we just, after seeing the subpopulation results, not the aggregate results, but after seeing that we can catch the variation in this treatment effect, and then we said maybe we can also contain this use case as a contribution of this research, this study too. But in total, while creating this kind of environment, or maybe a tool to calibrate for specific tasks, specific research purposes, definitely it is hard to validate. So we should run lots of things. I think it's a separate research project like an ERC or something else. But even under this condition, in these preliminary results, we just wanted to show you we can catch some variances in this treatment effect. So there are some subgroups in this data, and we can replicate. So these models can learn relationships too, in addition to some aggregate level, variation level, or mean level metrics. So this was the key idea behind. You are totally right as being critical.
Like, I'm just going to share one of my thoughts. We are going to follow up my train of thought actually. Like, I was wondering, like, we saw some treatment effect is more higher in the region part of the
Yes.
care.
Yes.
Yeah, it is logical, but I was wondering if maybe this treatment effect is higher because there are more data collected in this region, because in East Central Anatolia,
No. Yeah.
maybe it's lower because there isn't any alternative. It's logical to have this treatment effect is higher in this area, but maybe in East Central Anatolia, maybe the respondents are lower. That's why there wasn't any variation between them. I only talk, and I also wanted to see the intersection of the Kurdish peoples, because we can see there is a totally like shifts. The treatment is more effective on them, and maybe I wanted to see where this treatment diverge to some subgroups.
Kurdish living in Aegean part.
Kurdish with higher education, Kurdish with lower education.
The claim of this survey is to be at national, to be representative at national level. So if you look at subgroups, then we start to lose some additional varieties of these groups. But they also consider not one region too. So they also represent these inside variation of NUTS 1 regions. So for this reason, the difference between different regions doesn't come from the number of observations. And that's also why we cannot be so specific as a response to your second question.
May I?
Yeah, of course.
Do you have another?
Yeah, I plan also to also address something from what maybe is useful for you guys and based on Anna's comments. So in kind of the field of computational modeling that I've worked in, there we've always used computational modeling or agent-based modeling as theory builders or hypothesis creations. So rather than actually drawing conclusions, we just say, oh, this is the hypothesis that comes out, like a forecast. So you kind of know how to look at like next protests or to kind of give you an idea of where to look. And then you validate and you kind of make conclusions based on actual data. So maybe you could also see this method more as a forecasting, like the weather, rather than an actual representation or concluding thing. There is a really cool paper about this on computational modeling and theory building, and I can share it in the group. I think it's super interesting to read because it also addresses these limitations, and specifically with LLM personas. I think it's very good. That's it.
I take this as a contribution, so I do not respond.
Thank you. I think that was really fascinating. And I agree with you. There's also, there's a market there and probably maybe I think that also speaks to your first question, why we need AI to why we need to replicate the public service actually. And my perspective, like from a political science perspective, I have more like contextual presentation. So for me, we all know that from contextual public literature, being young, being educated, being led, leaning, those are all high probability for to participate in a forecast. So actually, those outcomes were expected. Maybe I was just
Yes, you're right.
Just brainstorm. I would like to say and I think the question with TGSS, if I'm not mistaken, so did you attend this forecast?
Yes.
And if you you're giving personas to each, let's say LLM, and maybe AIs are creating enough to say that, would you rather attend the pro-Palestine project?
Yeah.
The Kurdish mother tongue education, right? So maybe better to see those kind of I know you're out of your budget. Maybe start to change your
Thank you.
fund for you.
Thanks a lot.
Nuances, and I think also that speaks to your first question, kind of justifies that. I mean, maybe it's better to say that we are exploratory in that sense. We are trying to see, the variations, the nuances of
Yes.
Because did you attend the protest itself? Very broad questions because protests can be occur at a very local level, regional level, national level, or maybe transnational level. It's they also have this solidarity.
Yes.
And those are really different things. So maybe it's better to see those kind of maybe you can say you're not Helin, but you're that thing, let's say. You just voted for that party, let's say. Would you rather attend a pro-Palestine thing? Or you are, let's say, Nejat from Izmir, and would you rather attend those, you are a middle-aged man, would you rather attend those? And so maybe, and also I think that your question, actually, I don't think that it necessarily speaks to your literature. Because I don't think, you started with the social movements literature, but your question was, I think, more related, from a liberal perspective, would you rather promote the rights of to be educated in the mother tongue? So those kind of nuances may be like just the sake of refining of the project. A political scientist may kind of sometimes the reviewer too can be obsessed. And also, yes, and as I said, that maybe those were kind of expected, and also from a political scientist view, like we didn't see any elections. Public opinion and protest. There are so many mechanisms in between, and I think one of them is elections. And we were talking about the treatment effect, but some scholars say that we have the treatment effect who didn't participate in protesting, but actually changed their mind and voted for the other side. Like a Republican after January 6th, or let's say Sarah China protests and AKP votes maybe change their mind. So those could be like treatment effects. Maybe Nikki, you can say for the nuance again. Your end, like you voted for AKP, blah 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 blah. But would you rather attend a pro-Palestine or after those pro-Palestine protests, would you rather still like working for DHP, let's say? Those kind of things, because I think elections are a big mechanism, like in between the political support, public opinion, and also the protest. It's also a way of protesting sometimes.
I think they can't ask those kind of questions now because at the first step, they should show that they can actually replicate the previous survey.
But they have the data for that too, right? Who did you vote?
Was the outcome satisfactory for you?
We didn't try to replicate the election.
But they have the
But we meant
too.
But the dependent variable in this context, in the context you proposed is understanding the impact of elections on public opinion, whether it mediates the impact of protest or not, right? Something like that. So because in political context, we can just vary political context in addition to armed conflict and peace scenarios, we can just double the number of contexts, election-related armed conflict, non-election-related armed conflict, or election-related peace, non-election-related peace. We can just add new scenarios to our design, if it is your question. But great contributions. Thanks a lot. I was just responding your last question, but
Thank you so much.
so maybe we can just start because I think you have another session after 10 minutes, right?
Yes, not 10 minutes. We delayed it for half an hour.
Great.
Because this went on like longer than expected, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
4:20 in the tower section.
Burada şu an büyük bir problem var. Kayıt başlamamış.
I got it.
Ha, yok başlamış.